Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Connect University session on media literacy in the digital age. My name is Andreea Dumitrașcu, and I'm part of the Connect University team. Many of you are already familiarized with Connect University, but for those who are attending our sessions for the first time, Connect University, the flagship of DigiConnect, is dedicated to exploring the future of digital, presenting the latest digital trends, and spreading knowledge on emerging technologies. In the program, you can find inspiring presentations on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, blockchain, online disinformation, and other key topics. We invite you to have a look on our webpage for more details. Today's event is part of the Tackling Online Misinformation initiative, series of sessions organized for allowing the participants to get a holistic overview of the digital media ecosystem with a focus on the importance of countering online disinformation. Today, our distinguished speakers will tell you more about the importance of media literacy in the digital age. For those who are not yet connected via Slido, we invite you to do so using the code Media Literacy. You can ask questions and we'll make sure that we will allocate them accordingly. This being said, without further ado, I invite our first speaker, who will also be the moderator of the session, Annie Hellman, Deputy Head of Unit of DigiConnect's Unit Media Convergence and Social Media. Annie, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea. And from my side also, warmly welcome to all of you watching us online. Unfortunately, we have to be seeing each other through the screen, but I'm sure this session will anyway be quite interesting. So as Andrea already said, we are talking about media literacy in the digital age, and we have a set of 4 great speakers, which I will introduce to you. What we want today to discuss is these questions. I hope you can see this question that I share on my screen. So media literacy in the digital age is more than, or it's, let's say it's digital media, it's online media literacy, but it is more than just kind of looking at the content. It's also understanding how to use the content, how to have access to the content. So we are going to talk about these questions. How can our societies become better informed? What tools do we have to guarantee that the information is trustworthy and available for Europeans? And how can EU citizens become more resilient against disinformation and its temptations to make quick and possibly irrational conclusions? This is the core of media literacy, to understand what we see and what we read and what we hear. And then, quite importantly, what has media literacy community learned from the COVID crisis and how to retain that wisdom for the future? And then we will discuss what the next steps should be for media literacy, building on the experience we already have in Europe. The angles that are present in this expert panel are academia, media literacy practitioners, member states, fact checkers, journalists. So I'm very happy to welcome our very distinguished panel. And I'm just trying to make my slides move. So our speakers today, I will present each speaker when their turn comes, is Divina Meigs, Mikko Salo, Agnieszka Ostrava, and Robert Tomljanovic. And I will just, slight problem with my computer, just a moment. I will be able to present them then when they start the discussion. So without further ado, our first speaker is Divina Meigs, and I will tell you a bit about Divina and then I'll pass the floor to her. So Divina is, we know her for a long time because she was one of the members of our high-level expert group for fake news. She's also a professor of media sociology at Sorbonne Nouvelle University in France, and she holds degrees both from Sorbonne, Standard University, and the Annenberg School for Communications, the university in Pennsylvania. She specializes in media studies and is a worldwide recognized promoter of media and information literacy as a way to combat radicalization and disinformation. She conducts research on the media uses and practices of young people, and she has published more than 30 books, including the upcoming Handbook on Media Education Research with Wiley. So who is the better to start our session on media literacy and disinformation? I have to mention also that she holds a UNESCO chair Savoir Devenir in Sustainable Digital Development, Mastering Information Cultures, and is the president of Savoir Devenir, an NGO dedicated to the 21st century literacies and digital transition. And what can I say? This top expert we are very proud to have as our first speaker. So I would like to pass the floor to Divina.
Thank you, Annie, for this introduction that is going to make it possible for me to get rid of my first slide. And thank you for having me in this event, this Connect University. I'm very glad to be part of this community. And it's about community that I want to lay the emphasis. I'm a chair of the European chapter of GAPMIL, which is a global alliance for partners in media literacy. And it's part of this very thriving community that I feel is extremely powerful and that gives me as much guidance as I try to give guidance to it. Very reciprocal process between all of us. You asked me to talk about research. Next slide, please. And it so happens that we are producing with a whole community of researchers, more than 60 writers, the Handbook of Media Education Research. And basically we realized with this handbook that media literacy has a long story. It starts in the 1920s with the printed press in the school. And it has a complex research agenda. Basically, I've tried to sum it into 5 categories. The histories and theories of media literacy. We have very different cultures. Europe is one of the leading ones, very much putting media literacy under the auspices of freedom of expression. But other cultures are more based on consumer approaches or edu-communication. So we have a specific framework to work with in Europe, and we should be very proud of it because it's a leadership kind of approach we have. We are, before anything else, media literacy is about education, pedagogy, practices, very hands-on approach. And policies and training came later. And as you know, right now, there's a lot of policies going on media education. It's also always taken into account youth. This is our basic stake, citizenship for young people, the users, the risks, the opportunities of media, and now the online media, of course. And among the trending issues are the ones we are going to talk about today, disinformation, radicalization, all of this to do what? Well, to create critical citizens for the future. And so at the moment, we are at a very interesting turning point in our history, especially with the COVID-19 crisis. Are we going to stay the second curriculum, the sort of hidden curriculum that you do when you have some moment in schools or when you do outside schools, or are we going to move to the first curriculum? Next slide, please. Because the impact of radicalization and disinformation has been very strong on media and information literacy, it has actually changed our epistemology, the keywords that organize us as thinkers and researchers. So you'll see that on the political axis, you have this idea of polarized societies, radicalized societies, and on the other axis, which is more the media and communication axis, and you have publicity and advertising on the one hand, the commercial arm of media, and propaganda on the other hand, the political arm of media. Next slide. And in order to take care of these last 2 elements I mentioned in the research, youth cultures, citizenship and critical citizenship, and embark with these changes, this impact on us due to radicalization and disinformation, I've launched with a whole team of researchers in Romania, Sweden, Spain, and France on a project called UCheck that is funded actually by the DG Connect and Program Media Education for All. It's based on a plugin which is called InVid. which is a plugin to debunk fake news and to verify videos and images. And because our perspective was that young people in particular watch many more videos and images than they watch text. And so it's very important to be able to ensure that they get high quality information, visual information. So it's about visual literacy in many ways. Next slide. Because InVid has very interesting functionalities, and I've listed some of them here. It's about retrieving metadata. It's about fragmenting videos to allow image similarity. It's about search and search across several social media about the same image in its different contexts. It's about comparing search engines, and believe it or not, Yandex is one of the best search engines if you want to debunk fake news, not Google, not so much Baidu. You can also look at inside images because there's a magnifying lens function. And you can also, and young people like it very much, you can use forensic. You can detect alterations, little changes in the pixels of images and figure out where it has been transformed. Usually in media and information literacy, the technology is not our center, it's not our entry point. But in this case, we think that it's going to help, and it's one of the changes. And we are now having technologies and tools that are smart, that are AI-driven, and with which we can play with. And they align themselves on cognitive processes like retrieving, fragmenting, searching, comparing, filtering. These are new competences for media and information literacy and for visual and data literacy. And this is how we are embarking in these changes to fight and counteract disinformation. Next slide. And for instance, what we have done is ensure that InVid could be a tool used by teachers and young people, the general public at large. This is the project UCheck. We found that it was difficult, and so we went and created a serious game with missions so that people could enter the application via a tool that is playful. The results are preliminary for the moment, and what we see is that teachers agree that it's a great tool for cognitive visual literacy, but it's too much of a generalist professional tool for everyday use, and it requires much more finessing than is the current situation of the tool. What they're going to do, as many teachers do, is use it otherwise and use it for its cognitive functionalities like filtering, like comparing, like implementing different search engines, which is perfect, which is exactly what visual literacy in the digital era should be about. So the results are mitigated. Teachers like it. It's too professional. There has to be some transfer, and this is where we as professionals, as advocates of media and information literacy, can provide resources and interfaces. Next slide, please. And when we do, for instance, training, we've just created a MOOC, a massive online course on disinformation, verification, and refutation, which are the three tenets for us of what this whole campaign, media literacy campaign against disinformation should be about. And we have to go to the final step, refutation, counter discourses, counter narratives. When we try InVid in this context, we see that it generates good results in terms of knowledge content, and the global results are putting people well above the average. Reaching the objectives in terms of tools for combating is that orange, major satisfaction. The interest in media literacy is enormous and appears, be it for the disinformation segment, the verification segment, or refutation segment, and key to all of us, of course, the interest in pursuing media and information literacy is confirmed. And so lots of interest, and MOOCs are efficient to help train people. In this case, it was decision makers in the Culture Ministry of France. Next slide. What conclusions can we draw out of this? slide, please. It seems that conclusions have jumped. I've done a kind of SWOT analysis of the different strengths and weaknesses and threats. Among the strengths, we can see it. Training exists. MOOCs are there. A lot of virtual classes have happened during the COVID. So resources are there. Many actors are being implicated. We have some on the board today, Savoir Devenir, NGOs, the state, etc. We have a solid definition of disinformation, of media and information literacy too. It's in the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. We have a policy framework across Europe with that directive. We have a lot of communities that are implicated. Our weaknesses, you see them. Funding, still not clear what we are receiving from where. Evaluation remains very poor. We are based on good practices. People, NGOs especially, hardly have time to evaluate properly, independently. Very poor reporting, a lack of coordination across sectors at the EU level, in governments. The EU level, we have the division on education and culture. We have the DG Connect. We have DG Justice. There's several divisions that try to work together. At the level of governments, it's the same thing between Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth. And this maybe is one of the weaknesses. And it creates disparities across Europe. Northern countries are extremely well coordinated, have mail in their programs, media education in their curricula. Other countries and the newly emerging post-communist countries yet have difficulties. I'm missing one of the SWOTs. Can you click once more on the slide, please, to see the opportunities? The opportunities are what's happening now. COVID, information disorders, they draw attention on the need to really educate the whole population, not just young people. And we have all this multimodality, of course, that is made easier by internet. On the threats, the major problem that I see is the independence of research. Unless we have a program at EU level in our nations, research might be funded by Facebook and Google, which is to say, giving social media platforms a lot of opportunities, and it's their marketing arm that is guiding research, not the research agenda itself. And also a strange competition with fact checkers and fact checking, where sometimes mail and fact checking, media literacy and fact checking are diluted or absorbed by fact checkers and fact checking. The risk with having a lot of actors involved, especially in civil society, is the disengagement of governments, delegating it to uncoordinated actors in the field. So last slide, what do we do towards a media and information literacy agenda? You've noticed that I've switched to mail instead of ML, because I think it's long time that we should include information in the agenda. So it's about figuring out the competences that are needed for people, making media and information literacy part of a basic first curriculum, not the second one. Maybe have PISA evaluations, and this is talked about at the moment. Information is being evaluated in PISA, maybe not so much media and communication. Teacher training is key, and we know it works online and offline, and we need reporting and monitoring. This is where what we said in the report on the disinformation online task force, we need a clearinghouse at EU level to fight the disparities, to ensure that we can share research results and best practices. And my point of caveat, my attention point before I close, is independence and transparency. We need independent funding for this kind of training and for this kind of research. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Divina. Am I on the air now?
Yes, and we can hear you.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Divina. That was very interesting. Some words that kind of, I have a lot of questions, so I think we don't have time to hear them all. But what is very interesting for me is you talk about visual literacy, because it is so visual these days. That is very interesting. And the other one is kind of the understanding the way humans function is so key to being able to debunk disinformation and guide people to the right path. And I love the idea of using serious games, because that's such an effective way of learning. I will have to prevent myself from asking more questions and talking about it. We will be able to talk later. Andrea, have we had any questions from the audience?
Yes, indeed. We already received a few questions from Slido. I'm going to read them. So what's the main difference between the search engines Yandex and Baidu, and which is better for our purposes? This question comes from Vanda Kalia.
Okay, so we give the floor to Divina. Would you want to answer that way?
I knew you would be teased by this. The point in media literacy is not to make people depend on one single search engine, to know that there are several, to have what I call pluralism and diversity in search. And usually by default, people have Google, and Google is pretty good, but Google tends to follow your history and serve you your history because of its algorithms. So when you use search engines that are less familiar to you, they'll respond differently. In terms of fighting fake news, Yandex actually tends to have some images, some videos that are coming from other parts of the world, not just the United States or Europe. And this is often where fakes are created or concocted, I will not name countries, but from this perspective, Yandex, a Russian search engine, and Baidu, the Chinese search engine, provide ways of backtracking to the original image, maybe sometimes faster because they have different sources than Google or Quant if you're using these as the usual search. I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you. We have time to take one more question, and then I suggest we go to Mikko. Maybe then, Andrea, shall I pick a question? Is that okay?
Sure, please.
Okay. Because there's a nice, well, not a nice question, but a challenging question. A study shows that 90% of misinformation remains online. Well, it says, what are the actions taken by online platforms in this regard? That's maybe not a question we can so much answer, but what should we do about this? I mean, what can academia do about this?
Information works. So we know that a lot of the disinformation is here, but it can come back. We have fakes from 2014 re-emerging in a new context and being updated in 2017 and 2020. As soon as you know that, you are alert and you know how to use either websites that are doing fact-checking, or you use plugins like Invid, and they'll go back to the first source. So we have tools, and now they have to become more and more easy to use. Everybody who's been using Invid is asking for an app, a quick response tool. That's easy, and that can be lazy. So, of course, in media literacy, we don't take the lazy course. We take the path of debunking ourselves and refuting, creating the counter narrative, so that yes, there are going to be fake news getting more and more present online. But if we have also the counter narrative that goes with it, and if we ask the social media platforms, when you're suggesting if you like this, then you might like, why don't you also push the right answers? And so it's all in a negotiation with the social media platforms that they offer contradictory suggestions and trends so that they send also to the corrections. So that's what we hope to do. And that is going to build resilience. But it's a long-term process, education, as you all know.
Okay, thank you very much. There are other questions, but we can take those a bit later, because now I would like to give the floor to Mikko. And Mikko Salo is the founder of the independent Finnish fact-checking and information literacy service called Faktabari, FactBar in English. And Faktabari started fact-checking already in the 2014 EU elections. And that's well before the fact-checking and the challenges in social media networks surfaced, and also before Commission started to have this before we started to have our kind of very focused discussion on disinformation also in DG Connect. In 2018, Mikko participated like Divina in the independent high-level expert group on online disinformation that was initiated by the Commission, representing the civil society organizations in the field of fact-checking and media literacy. He has a comprehensive career both in European affairs and with several networks tackling disinformation, and next to his current NGO functions. And in parallel, he works for the Finnish University of Technology. So we are very interested to hear the fact-checkers' viewpoint on media and information literacy, and what is digital information literacy, which is the kind of key area now. So over to you, Mikko.
Previous slide, actually, I think we went. Yeah, okay. This is just to kind of link perhaps to the context and to Divina's wonderful speech that I kind of subscribe as such. Yes, we started a fact-checking efforts in 2014, and the picture on the right might talk to some of the Brussels-based audience that I assume is one of the key element here. We were awarded on our fact-checking efforts on the European elections, and that European elections since was a kind of a red line towards the next efforts and as such, and for supporting it. Next to that, I have been working myself on 4 different EU institutions, so I have tried to help the community also from the point of view of trying to understand it from inside, but no links as such to the institutions. But with this picture, and then there is an address faktabari.fi/edu where you can find then a lot of much more information on our efforts as such. I just try to explain you a little bit our approach and where we try to head, because how I see our role in the big picture has been more like a catalyst. We are not the biggest fact-checking organization for sure. We are not the biggest media literacy efforts for sure, but I believe we have been pretty much on the frontier of trying to see what would be needed and what is our common challenge. That's why I basically put our title like information literacy. The information is the core in fact-checking. I mean, that's what we try to verify. The fact-checkers start with a question, really having seen something or reading something. But I think everything is going more and more visual as such. Literacy, of course, then the element that we integrated into our fact-checking 2018, thanks to Helsinki Finnish School, that we have worked very intensively and as piloting many approaches in Finland. But then I put also the digital and media there, because the media literacy seems to be the big concept that kind of unites pretty much everybody, but under that is done a lot of different things. And I hope we will have a chance to kind of see, and Divina already touches that, what are the big challenges within that one. Digital, in a way that's of course the playground, and especially as we are focusing on teachers and youngsters within the school. I mean, everything is digital for them. pretty much, like it was referred also on the disinformation side. But this is a little bit to scope there. But as such, information literacy and fact-checking work pretty well together. But I think there is still some way to go to mainstream it, but I think there are some efforts going on. Next slide, please. So Faktabari Edu brings together fact-checking experts, journalists, media specialists, and of course, when we are talking about education, pedagogues, to create some information literacy tools. And then we very much kind of trust on the good teachers in our case that want to do their best in this, so to say, crazy world and in the digital sphere, and the debates that are ongoing in the classrooms and in some sort of a safe harbors, because we believe that, of course, information literacy, media literacy is important for all ages, but we have to make the impact very young. Because, I mean, after that, we are pretty much on our own in the digital space. And whereas in schools type of surroundings, you can still discuss and debate the approaches that people have seen and what they have felt. Because we know that the disinformation is more about the feeling than it's about the facts. And we are led on those sides. So our focus has been to support teachers in dealing with social media issues in the classroom context. I put one link to a project called Check or Cheat. That's a game type of approach that we are developing within one EU small project, and we hope that we can continue later on. But it's an effort to try to see how different approaches kind of along Europe can coexist within the card game sector. Finally, we try to empower students with critical thinking and information literacy skills to resist mis- and disinformation, to cope with the information disorders. Information disorders, I think, is a wonderful concept, thanks to Claire Wardle and the colleagues on making a very comprehensive agenda. If we are focusing only on mis- and disinformation, we might lose a little bit the bigger picture, even if these might be the serious stuff. But information disorder is a good approach to have. And of course, to activate then outside classrooms the students to verify and their social media content and take care of their privacy. And this privacy part, I think, is super important in nowadays. There is one part that people can kind of digest. They can work with the tool, what the fact checkers can do. But your internet and my internet are not simply similar. And this is a kind of an Heureka effort we have to understand in order to get to the bottom of the things and to the structures of the internet. And there remains, I believe, the biggest chunk of work for the EU institutions, because that's not for individuals to tackle. That's for the EU institutions and the big tech platforms to work on. There are a couple of references to very recent material we have published in UK and something on infodemic simple guidelines on the pictures side. Next slide, please. And these are, so to say, more like on our advocacy work nationally, and why not on the European level. There is both dimensions, the divisions of powers depends case by case. But we certainly believe that the media information literacy should be included in the national curricula to have something tangible that people could really get to the structures. And after that, there are many ways to proceed country by country. But there is a good work done already by the EU institutions, but constantly to be followed. Teachers should be trained, and they should have tools and methods to deal with these information disorders. Teachers, I mean, if you have to be like an NGO, you have to be very economical. If you have to focus on one target group, teachers are the multipliers. And then, the students finally, but really from the first grades. We have been interviewed by CNNs and Guardians, and they've been always like wondering that, oh, you can really start it. And we have really some pilots starting from the first graders. And of course, the tools are completely different. It's about storytelling, it's about tales, good old style, nothing necessarily very techy at that stage. They are already into that world. But the teacher coming from the analog world in most of the case, and the students coming from a very digital world, at least in the case of Finland, can kind of exchange on that one. We very much also believe in the interaction between journalists, media experts, and schools to guarantee the plurality of the views. And even already in the school context, it depends so much in the end on the teacher level. So in order to get different people visiting, telling what they are doing, journalists is a much, much bigger group than fact checkers. So there is a big potential of inviting them to schools and explain how do they see the world from their lenses. And this is of course big potential, and I know there are good initiatives working on that one as well. Next slide, please. I think at this stage I'll leave it here. You get more information on faktabari.fi/edu, and I think we will have questions and more debate afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikko. So we have a few questions. Andrea, do you have a pick of questions for us?
Sure. So maybe
we cannot hear you very well.
What about now?
Yes, now I hear you well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So for Mikko, we have a question received from Florin. What advice would you give to a journalist at the beginning of her career regarding media literacy?
For a young journalist in early ages, I think a journalist could or should consider him or herself as some sort of a media literate person. I mean, that's what basically the training for journalists, what we have worked with the schools pretty much aims that they are able to digest the elements of that one. So I know that the European Journalist School, for example, have invested now to get back to the verification and fact checking, and not just the new tools. So be very focused on the trustworthiness of your tools. And I mean, this is probably the kind of the verification of fact checking skills are the something you can bring to the debate and to everybody who is following your work, and being very transparent on that side, I think is as such already media and information literacy to me.
Okay, thank you, Mikko. Just one point I want to say to the audience is that we will still have another session later in July, which will more focus on disinformation and the activities that we are doing there on the policy side, like the communication, disinformation, and COVID, etc. So the questions that are especially about the platforms and disinformation may be best presented in that session. What I can say is that indeed there was a comment on EDMO, the European Digital Media Observatory, that is an infrastructure that has started, launched by at the initiative of the Commission for supporting independent fact-checking and research. And the idea is that eventually that will be complemented by national hubs able to support and foster media checking in those countries, and these to create together a network for fact-checking, as was already presented or foreseen in the communication from 2018 on disinformation online. So those questions maybe are better to that session. One thing that came to my mind, on the other hand, about what Mikko had said and what Divina also said, is something I heard from a participant in a panel on media literacy that I was moderating in Poland. And the participant said that when he was young, he was taught, as we were taught, at least people of my age, that everything you read is true, and you must learn it, and you must understand it, and you must not doubt it. And it is very interesting that what we now need to teach the younger generations is to make them understand that everything you read may not be true. Quite the contrary. We have to serve them tools and make them aware to understand that what they see online is not true. So the world has changed quite significantly. And with our attitudes, we must change our attitudes when we talk to the young people to match that of their world. So again, I have a lot of questions to ask, which I will not ask, but instead I will pass the floor to our next speaker, who is Agnieszka Ostrava from Poland, and she is from the Center for International Relations, which is one of the oldest Polish think tanks dealing with international affairs. And she's responsible for the center's projects on media literacy, combating propaganda and mapping pro-Kremlin and Chinese influence in Central and Eastern Europe. A former television journalist specializing in European issues, she has a journalistic viewpoint also to our challenge. And before Poland's access to the EU, she was a publication specialist in the European Commission Information and Communication Program in Poland, and the editor-in-chief for the Integration, which is a monthly publication by the Center for European Information at Office of the Committee of European Integration. So, yet another impressive speaker. And I would like now, Agnieszka, to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, especially that such honorable panelists are taking the floor. I would like to talk about media literacy for combating COVID-19 pandemic, and I would like to actually observe that paradoxically this pandemic has created an opportunity to demonstrate the importance of media literacy and critical thinking. Well, it's for obvious reasons, because believing in fake cures and pseudoscience can be, well, as deadly as COVID-19 itself nowadays. So it's very, actually, I would risk saying that it is difficult at the moment not to be quite well informed for those who want about the pandemic, about this very subject. And it is also difficult not to be able to reflect upon the importance of media literacy at the times such difficult as these ones, which is quite a positive trend. Sorry, just trying to change the slide, but... And also, what moreover we can observe is like great mobilization of different actors, different backgrounds, coming from different backgrounds, in order to contain this infodemic. We can see that media, internet portals, traditional media, and also internet media, social media, state bodies, they highlight the verified information on COVID, carry information campaigns, debunk fakes on a massive scale. So I would say that the sea of this information is kind of counterbalanced by the sea of very positive and very valuable initiatives that are aiming to, first of all, share the verified information, but also to strengthen the abilities of critical thinking, asking questions, being media literate on the side of the internet users. Various debunking initiatives, and here the European Commission initiatives and being active have to, the initiatives have to be appreciated. Stratcom's regular updates about what are the main narratives of this info. There are numerous fact-checking initiatives on the side of civil society organization, very often voluntarily done. Lithuanian elves, who started, of course, earlier, but now such initiatives are more and more, I would say, common in the face of the common danger as COVID-19 and the attempt to save society from falling into the trap in believing in all these unscientifically based recipes. There is also digital social media, digital platforms. We have to appreciate that they, in a way, manage to self-regulate. Maybe it's not perfect yet, but what they do is that they do label fake content. They do remove fake news regarding COVID-19, and the scale of that is enormous. It is like really millions of fakes when we see what the fact-checking agencies do for, at least for example, Facebook. Google, that has links to very trustworthy and valuable information, also has to appreciate it. Academia and think tanks who work also for the sake of media literacy and combating the infodemic. They carry research, they organize conferences, they publish reports, they analyze trends, they public policy recommendations, they deal with strategy and communication and recommend actions in this field. So I would say that this pandemic really gave this opportunity to create like a very, very big mobilization moment for numerous actors from different spheres. And here also comes our organization. We have been dealing in the Center for International Relations with the subject of combating disinformation, internet warfare, with enhancing critical thinking among media users, especially internet users, for quite a long time now. And right now, with the help of European Commission, under the umbrella of the call Media Literacy 2019, and in cooperation with 3 partners from Belgium, from Croatia, and from Lithuania, we are actually constructing an internet a digital space that is aimed at strengthening media literacy and critical thinking skills on the side of internet users. And may I ask you, Andrea, to switch onto the website itself so that I can share it with our audience. This is the beta stage of the. Can't see it right now, but
I will share it via Slido so that everyone will be able to.
Okay, the slowdown, yes, it's always. So, in a moment you will see this is the part of the project, a website that we are creating that is supposed to help the internet users to understand the mechanisms of manipulations, to understand what are the most popular narratives, and also understand the counter-narrative and refuting this disinformation, which is very, very important in our opinion, because it's not about the real only debunking, but it is also about showing the truth, the reality, and also showing the positive narration quite often to the story. It's supposed to be, this website, help to distinguish facts from opinion, which is not an easy task, and to find reliable sources on information. We have a special place to share fact-checking tools, very, very concrete ones, which are numerous. And what Divina was saying about INVIT, I'm sure that we could also take advantage of that and try to also propagate the existence of still another plugin, another extension that is supposed to help people to become fact checkers a little bit themselves, so which is sometimes a necessity today. Because what we want to do actually, and I would like to stress that we think that there are so many very valuable initiatives undertaken by all these actors that I've been mentioning before, that it is very important to kind of try to achieve some synergy effect and to integrate all these attempts and try to give them, just to collect them on one platform. So we aim at rewarding and giving visibility to all these organizations and also individuals who at some point or in some way very broadly deal with the idea of building society resilience, of debunking disinformation, fighting disinformation and propaganda activities, spreading media literacy. For the time being, the project is in a beta phase, so it only concerns 4 partner countries: Poland, again, Croatia, Belgium, and Lithuania. But we think that it is good for a start, and we hope to be able to extend it onto the whole of European Union after we have checked how certain solutions work. And the additional aim of our project is to map all these organizations that deal with the subject, because it is, again, very important to have a clear picture who deals exactly in what and in which field, because we think that this collective intelligence, having all these organizations connected with the issues from different angles, different perspectives, this is the great strength of the project, especially, and that's the third actually point I would like to make, that we are at the times when COVID-19 and this pandemic quite often is used to undermine also the achievements of European Union, and it's undermine the European Union ability to react successfully and to react constructively at times of pandemic. And what is worrying, this is a worrying trend. I was trying to be optimistic and see good things that we could draw from the pandemic that taught us, but the very worrying trend is that this information not only comes from external sources, and this is what European Commission is so eagerly underlining, this pro-Kremlin influence, Chinese influence, that we can see, that we experience, that we can see the links to pro-Kremlin media, to foreign governments, but also very important thing and a worrying trend is that this information comes from internal sources, from politicians, from our member states also. And the pandemic is used as a pretext to attack the union or diminish its strengths. So with great regret, I could read quite recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, the report made by another Polish think tank, like our PS, the Bronisław Geremek Foundation, and they prepared a report about the image of European Union at the early stages of pandemic in Poland, and their observation is that actually the majority of content which is against and very unfavorable towards European Union is kind of shaped by Polish politicians and by Polish state media. And this is something that we should also take under consideration. And I would like to actually end my presentation with a question: what we should do about it, and whether the European Commission should or shouldn't be more active in also naming and shaming the nation states, the member states, for being the actors of disinformation, being a source of disinformation. Because, well, I think that such naming and shaming could also be a good step forward towards the bigger media literacy and critical thinking on the side of our societies, especially in this part of Europe. So that's my question to all of us. Especially, I'm using the opportunity that we are hosted here by such noble hosts as the European Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Agnieszka. Challenging questions and very interesting. I mean, what we have all seen, which is a good thing in a bad thing, is that now that we have had the pandemic and we have been all challenged by it, it has, on the other hand, negatively, of course, there's been a lot of disinformation and a lot of negative, dangerous advice to people on how to treat the pandemic and the disease. On the other hand, it has brought this disinformation problem to as one of the mainstream of what people are thinking about. We saw that effect already in the European elections, the last ones, but this hopefully, alongside with the dangerous effects of people believing a lot of the crap that is online, there will be the effect of people realizing that, okay, these things are online, but we should think about it. We cannot believe them. And projects like Agnieszka's, I hope that the kind of impact will be bigger. All the projects that we have, there's one kind of challenge in everything we do, and that is bringing the great results to the big public. So that is what we need all to work together. How do we can ensure dissemination, exploitation of the results? But I wish you good luck with the project, which has only started in mid-April, which is, we are very happy about that. So with this, I think due to time, I will now give the floor to Robert Tomljenovic, sorry about the pronunciation. My Finnish mouth is not too good in Croatian names. Robert is a vice president of the Electronic Media Council, an independent regulatory authority for electronic media in Croatia. And since his appointment in 2013 to the council, he has launched a number of projects related to media literacy. And as an example, there is a web portal for media literacy and a project titled Media Literacy Days. He's also the author of the study Regulatory Authorities for Electronic Media and Media Literacy, which was published by the Council of Europe. And he will now tell us about the Council conclusions regarding media literacy, and he was member of the working group and the main drafter for these conclusions. Before joining the mentioned agency, Robert spent his professional career in the electronic media, widely in BBC World Service, RTL Croatia, and in the audiovisual industry, working as a journalist, editor, and producer. So we have great experience and wisdom here to share with us. I have to, before I give you the floor, also congratulate Croatia for the presidency, which has been an unprecedented online presidency, and nevertheless you were able to run it through and achieve. So over to you, Robert.
I'm happy and honored to be part of this audience. At the beginning of the conference, and you asked what lessons has media literacy learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. I may as well say the coronavirus has definitely spread much faster than media literacy and without any substantial resources or investments. I'm just kidding, of course. What I'm trying to emphasize is that in contrast to virus, which has unfortunately spread amazingly quickly, as for the media literacy, unfortunately, we need to invest tremendous efforts, a strategic approach, systematic investments, funding, and encourage engagement and cooperation of numerous social stakeholders. Media literacy calls for intensive cooperation and long-term commitment, including investments. I'm afraid there are no quick and easy solutions. The results are not immediate. They cannot be seen in a period of few years, let alone few months. I believe we are realistically talking about 5-10 years. This is the reason why media literacy is not attractive for politics as well, as there are no ad hoc solutions, and not many dare to tackle the issue. However, the conclusion of the Council of the European Union on media literacy adopted during the Croatian presidency, which ended just a few days ago, still seek to lay firm foundation for more effective developments of media literacy in EU member states. I'm confident they can serve to initiate certain activities and to raise awareness to establish a systematic approach to deal with the issue in media literacy. The member state holding the presidency of the Council of the European Union determines the topics that will be addressed by the Council, and the Council will make the conclusions on these topics, containing a series of proposed measures and activities which may be taken in certain area. The conclusions are the result of consensus, as they must be supported by all member states. The document places media literacy at the heart of media policy, considering it's crucial for protecting audience, ensuring pluralism in an algorithm environment, as well as for the combating social threats posed by disinformation. The work on document began even before anyone had heard of the COVID-19. However, there was no need for the text to be adapted to the new situation. In fact, this great global crisis, the coronavirus pandemic, only underlined the importance of systematic approach to the development of media literacy and empowerment of citizens, as well as the need for reliable source of information and transparency of online platforms. Infodeming and other numerous forms of disinformation and how to address disinformation brought about by the pandemic was earlier discussed by Agnieszka and Miko, so I'll try to focus our attention to other elements and Council conclusion. On numerous occasions, we have reiterated that new media and communication platforms have changed social and communication relationships and the way we produce, distribute, and consume content. It seems that these new times, along with numerous advantages, of course, have additionally brought about an increasing amount of disinformation, manipulation, and hate speech. It is therefore clear that today's world requires the acquisition of a great deal of new individual and societal knowledge and skills to enable citizens of all ages to access, select, understand, and make sophisticated and responsible use of information and different kinds of media, both professional and user-generated. And all these skills are an integral part of media literacy, which, as I mentioned in the introduction, requires systematic work to enable citizens of all generations with an opportunity to master these skills. And this should not be reserved for forms of formal education only. The conclusions show the need to develop new models of lifelong learning in media literacy for all age, and to enable all citizens to learn the skills that need to understand and operate within the highly complex media and communication landscape. The conclusions of the Council of the European Union thus call upon the member states to work systematically to raise public awareness of the importance of media literacy and support the consistent development of media literacy policies and their implementation. I believe that Divina will agree with my statement that developing media literacy policy is of an utmost importance. The adoption of national policy or strategy is an important issue because it widely elaborates elements and goals of media literacy, encourages its development, creates a platform for cooperation and synergy among the wider community members. It further initiates sets ground for a number of long-term viable media literacy projects. This enables a clear message to be sent about the importance of media literacy across the whole society. Furthermore, an awareness is being raised about the goals and activities on national and local levels, which further reinforce awareness as the topic is put in place at national level. There is no need for a national policy to set a definition of media literacy. What they need is to set out is an important concept of media literacy that will be relevant and comprehensible to all society members. Plus, national policy should place media literacy as one of the main citizens' competencies for life in the 21st century. Another important issue is that media literacy should incorporate cross-sectoral approach, and it should be actively supported by a number of national strategic documents related to educational, media, culture, and youth policy. National policy that is the concept of media literacy should be broad enough for various stakeholders to recognize their own needs and act upon incorporating them in their own strategy. Clear understanding of the concept in various contexts and by various stakeholders is the essential element in implementation phase. Getting back to the conclusion, which further invites member states to support the establishment and development of media literacy networks in order to bring together relevant stakeholders and enable them to cooperate and develop sustainable and long-term viable media literacy projects and initiatives. Experience in certain countries like Ireland or Finland shows that it is extremely important to have a platform to bring together diverse social stakeholders, the stakeholders who wish to engage in projects, who initiate activities, who coordinate, and who are ideally in a position to implement national media literacy policy plans. We have on numerous occasions emphasized the need for lifelong learning models of media literacy, and as a result, such a conclusion was proposed to member states with an additional remark that it might be a good idea to provide support for pilot projects and research, which will help to develop a new methodology and approach to media education. This implies developing of teaching and training materials and a systematic approach for enhancing the competencies of professionals in different fields, so as to enable them to strengthen their important role in developing citizens' media literacy. Cultural institutions such as the libraries, museums, and cinemas, which enjoy a high level of trust in society, should be encouraged to take advantage of their position they have in the society and to become actively involved in the media literacy projects and in the development of media literacy. It is also important to emphasize that the media outlets, especially public media service, should play a more prominent role in media education projects. It is highlighted that national media regulatory authorities can also have important role as they have the competencies and position to actively promote organized and coordinated media literacy activities. Furthermore, the document calls upon the European Commission to further strengthen and develop the concept of the European Media Literacy Week. I personally believe that European Media Literacy Week is an excellent idea. However, it should be improved, expanded, and decentralized. Mechanisms to facilitate collaboration should be established in all member states, and the European Commission should also provide for promotional tools for the event, as well as educational material that can be adopted at the local level. Bearing in mind the need for collaboration and networking, the Commission is called to develop, with forthcoming European Digital Media Observatory, mechanism to facilitate collaboration and the voluntary exchange of ideas and best practices in media literacy by a diverse range of stakeholders. Additionally, to develop in collaboration with member states systematic criteria and evaluation process for EU-funded media literacy projects and initiatives. The European Commission, as well as all member states, are invited to continue and undertake further efforts in terms of systematic, comprehensive, and cross-sectoral approach to developing media literacy and raising awareness of the importance of media literacy. They are further invited to promote funding initiatives financing media literacy-related research projects. The conclusion emphasizes the importance of cross-sectoral cooperation in promoting media literacy, as we firmly believe that media literacy should under no circumstances be ghettoized. Quite contrary, it must be present in all aspects of society. No stakeholder can achieve the goals of media literacy on their own, especially since the approach to media literacy as lifelong learning required different stakeholders who provide support to people at different stage in their learning project. I think it is enough for the moment from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Robert. This was very interesting. Council conclusions are always quite precious for the Commission and the Member States, and they give guidance on how to proceed. What came to my mind about, indeed, we have recognized the importance of learning media literacy for all ages, and it's lifelong learning in two ways. One is that you need to learn in all ages, and the second is that no learning will ever be enough, because that media, it is all the time developing. We will have, in 10 years, we will have new media which we don't recognize today, and us in all ages, we will have to be able to use them. So it is a very interesting and challenging area. I think I will now share my little overview of what the Commission is doing as a kind of review of it, partly responds to some questions. And I am now only focusing on media literacy. So I am not talking about the other things we are doing. I'm just trying to make my presentation, put it to presentation mode, just a moment. Voila. So we are talking about media literacy in the digital age. And as a very, very short overview, what we are doing in EC concerning especially media literacy, as I said, there will be a final session on this disinformation series of lectures somewhere around the 16th of July. The date is not yet decided. And on the other aspects of disinformation, there will be more information then. So media literacy is nevertheless one of the main pillars in combating disinformation, alongside working with the platforms and creating a fact-checkers network and ensuring that there is research in the field. Media literacy is quite essential because it's close to what people can do and how we can help them understand what they see and what they read. Regarding media literacy, as most of you know, we have had since 2016 pilot project and preparatory action series promoted by the Parliament called Media Literacy for All, which has had projects since the initiation in 2016. Now the projects that have just started are the ones of 2019, and we will have our last call now. It is open now, and that completes then the kind of Media Literacy for All series. It has been quite successful. It has had partners from most member states, and the kind of variation of projects has been quite interesting. We are very lucky to confirm that the continuation for this is as assured as anything can be regarding financing currently. It's part of the Creative Europe, and we hope to be able to establish clear funding there with a substantially higher level. The actual funding amounts we will not be able to share with you yet, because quite simply they haven't been set yet. In addition to the work on disinformation, media literacy for all, we also have the Media Literacy Expert Group, which, for example, has been working and discussing the Media Literacy Week that Robert mentioned. So in a way, we have a nice framework for media literacy in the EC, but all of it does require also active participation from people and member states. So what have the Media Literacy for All projects achieved in these years? These have been some of the aims of the project: to create a network for educators. And in response to some of the comments already, there is a focus now also on media literacy to all ages. It is quite important. We all need media literacy to understand the contemporary media. We have had and we have projects concerning tackling disinformation, working on media bias, and specifically, for example, COVID-related media disinformation. There are MOOCs, self-learning materials, videos, pop-ups, gamification. So the variety and richness of tools and methodologies in these projects is quite impressive. Also, we haven't forgotten, we need to teach the children, we need to teach the teachers, we need to teach the teachers of those teachers, and also newsrooms and journalists. So the coverage of whom to address is also quite impressive. The approaches have been innovative, co-creative, participatory. So in our understanding, in our assessment, the project as a whole, the series of projects, has been quite successful, and it will be a great tool to build on the future. So what media literacy has become in the years, from the traditional media literacy focusing maybe more on schools, books, what media was in the past. We've had a focus on tackling disinformation, and we have recognized how important digital literacy is. And in digital literacy, I think the COVID has also shown us that it's not only about, when you have content, assessing whether it's trustworthy or not, but it's also getting to that content, understanding where and how you can find information. All of this is happening now, and now it will be time to scale up and cross borders and collaborate across disciplines. So what we hope to achieve in Creative Europe is that we will be scaling up the good results that we have had. We want to cross the linguistic, country, cultural borders and share the good practices. and also the collaboration across even those disciplines which are here in the panel: academia, fact checkers, journalists, politicians. We need to get all those together so that we can scale up our work on media literacy. So that is basically what I will only say about the Commission. And now I try to get away from my, voila. And after this, I think it's a great time to have a discussion amongst the panelists and amongst audience. I hope we will have some questions on Slido, but before that, I am going to selfishly ask a few questions myself from our panelists. And I would like first to ask Mikko, in fact, as we have been talking about disinformation from your viewpoint. I mean, what is the major challenge for Europe now exactly? What do we do? What should we do exactly now?
Thank you. I can kind of subscribe to the last two speakers, but having worked in Commission and Council, I have to say that this was a little bit something for everybody. And yes, there is a kind of good ideas, but of course, and the conclusion scaling up is certainly the big storyline, because already in a high level group we talk about a need on massive scale, and I can say that everybody agreed on that one. But if you go a little bit behind the numbers and a little bit behind the beautiful terms, we see that we are talking about nitty-gritties for the time being. We are talking about a couple of millions, tens of millions max for a 500 million entity, so to say. So if you put a little bit on the perspective, we have to really scale up. And I cannot be without making the link to the policy that was also said by previously. So there is then the big question is about how to work with the platforms. And my point is that we cannot leave the media literacy to social networks and tech companies, at least only. It has to be balanced. We know that they are not covering the whole story. And we have suggested already 2018 that, of course, it's all about the funding. Currently, they engage a little bit here and there. It's about scaling up and finding some sort of clearinghouse for funding. So we really need something that this doesn't become a project sponsored by that one, making it always a kind of a bit of a label that, okay, they might cover this one well, but for example, the privacy side is not covered. So it's all about the kind of funding, scaling up, and we know in current COVID economics as well that this is an open debate to become for September onwards, and I really trust on the EU institutions on that one. I also encourage much coordination within the services. Having been there inside, I know how difficult it is, but very easily it gets blurred as we are talking as such a big phenomenon, and there are different kind of biases. Is it a security or a kind of privacy nexus and all that? But I kind of lean that you will find a good way on all levels, because that would be desperately needed to scale it up. Because this is all nice, this is all beautiful, but the challenges are big time, and in the end, this links very much to the kind of very fundamentals of the EU, and that's why I'm still positive that we have to get it right at this level, because there is no other level, especially on dealing constructively with the platforms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mikko. Maybe in a way, going on from that, if takes ask another question. I mean, the independence, the kind of ensuring independence of the research and fact checking and funding. I mean, Divina, you mentioned that in the beginning. How could we in Europe somehow ensure or maybe calm people's minds that the fact-checking and the academic efforts are independent. I think that's a concern that may undermine the fact-checking effort and even academia. But do you have any views on that? Can you unmute yourself?
I will say I, because it's the painful part. What is for sure is that if people have a feeling that research is not independent, they're not going to trust it. So it's crucial for at least the public service education and research to be well funded. So that there is a healthy competition, let's say, between research funded by the private sector and the public sector. At the moment, there is a total imbalance. The platforms are buying themselves a kind of virginity by putting a lot of money, they say, in fact-checking and media and information literacy. We know that it's much more on fact-checking for themselves than on media and information literacy. And so there's a disequilibrium there. And we also know that there is a kind of self-censorship of researchers and educators who receive private funds from the platforms. I don't doubt their honesty, but they are human beings, and that can have an impact on what they look at, the focus of the questions, the kind of results they'll deal with, and the kind of resolutions and recommendations they'll make. So even illustrious bodies, and we know them in England, in Germany, in Belgium, etc., are under suspicion in spite of their good work, and that's a shame. So what to do about it? Tax the platforms. Find the money where it is and where it has already been benefiting from a lot of public free support and free participation and contribution. There is a big debate about taxing the platforms now. It's never connected to where should the taxation money go. And there should really be a transparent debate about the priorities about this taxation money. It cannot just be sent into some kind of dark hole there for infrastructures, for whatever. Some of this money should be deflected for education at large, and media literacy in particular. I've counted that even if we ask for 0.05% of that taxation, it's already much more than we could attribute now. Yeah. So, and I think that in this moment where we need to feel again that the EU is a strength, it's something that protects us, that promotes a certain spirit of what it is to be European compared to what's to be Asian, what's to be from other kinds of more or less democratic societies. I think the EU has a leading role, a leadership role to take. And even though education is subsidiary and has to be done by the countries, let's take advantage of the fact that media literacy is not necessarily done in schools and innovate in that field. We already have, I think we already have a lot of instances and actors that are ready to move in that direction. I'm thinking about librarians. They've been mentioned in some of the questions. At the moment, they're not ready. There's a lot of discrepancies across Europe. I mean, if you look at the EBLIDA, European Network of Librarians, some of them are saying, we just deal with books. We're almost archivists. We don't have to deal with the public, etc. But I think a new generation can come in and be trained into media literacy. And in France, definitely, that's what we're seeing. It's media literacy. It's librarians who are in charge of media literacy by the Ministry of Culture. And they have such an eagerness to embark in this. The amount of projects I'm conducting with my association is staggering. We can't even supply all the need. That's why we created a MOOC so that they would all be trained in one go. And we had something like 87 entities register. And we know that they're going to have a snowball effect in the rest of France. So there are already institutions that need to be revitalized. Libraries there's less people going in them. Let's bring more people in. Older people are going. There can be intergenerational dialogue. There's a lot of things going on there that could be easily upgraded and upscaled, and not just scaled up. So I think the money is there if we know where to look for it, and it's a virtuous circle of money and funding used. And it's for me, it's essential. And tying in with Miko was saying, funding, training, evaluating, that's the new trilogy that we need to embark on. Before that, we were worried about resources. Do we have any resources? Do we have any actors? We are rich in Europe. We are rich at this level in terms of stakeholders, in terms of cross-country and cross-borders exchanges. We know the communities. We are a good community in the sense that it's a very generous community, very ready to spread, very open source, sharing, Creative Commons, you name it. So the issue now is not creating more resources, is using the ones we have and evaluating them. The ones that are efficient, we upscale. And so there we need a coordinating body. I still have my doubts about EDMO, but EDMO is recent. But EDMO is a misnomer because it says digital literacy. It's in fact about fact-checking. And that goes with one of my fears, that media literacy is going to be absorbed under fact-checking. And that's not the point. Media literacy is about a mindset. It's about living in the digital world in an ethical way. It's about taking the opportunities. And there's a lot of information orders. There's a lot of information, good things that we want to put forward in this world. And if we focus too much just on the disinformation, it's problematic and it's not enough in my mind. And so I'm really pushing for something that clearly has in its name Observatory of Media Literacy, so that the communities can congregate there. Right now, if you don't have the communities, as you know, behind a platform or behind some innovation, it fails with all the good intentions.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a lot of important points. One thing is that, okay, we need money. On the other hand, we can do a lot because we have already a lot. We can do a lot for kind of bringing people and thoughts together. I like the idea of media, or the reflection that media literacy is a mindset. Indeed, that's what it is. We are a bit running out of time. We can use, if I understand right, a bit of extra time. I would still like to give the floor to Robert or Agnieszka. Robert, would you have something you would like to ask the others? Or if you don't, I have a question for you. What would be kind of your final word in this, or final intervention in this session? Mike?
Yeah, Mike. Oh, definitely media literacy should be developed locally in the local context, and the responsibility heavily lies on the member states. The coronavirus pandemic has confirmed that media literacy is important to citizens. It is one of the key skills to protect themselves from disinformation and to eventually become active participants in the democratic process. It is therefore necessary that the member states should be more engaged in dealing with media literacy by adopting national strategies, establishing national platforms, or more importantly, by funding. Without substantial funding, progress is less likely to occur. As a result, the conclusions of the EU Council call for better utilization of EU funds and the need for evaluation process of funded projects. Member states should, furthermore, initiate their own investment in media literacy. This is not a substantial investment because the result heavily outweighed initial investment. And these include media literate citizens for health democracy. The European Commission should also further intensify its effort, implement a coordinated and cross-sectoral media literacy policy, and encourage engagement of member states to get involved in projects. Media Literacy Week is not sufficient, informal support is not sufficient, investments are needed for development of lifelong media education model, for cooperation and gathering of stakeholders, and above all, for the research of media literacy, but also the impact of media communication platforms on our lives.
Thank you. Very, very pertinent and wise words. And I'm sure the EC and the member states will continue their efforts, and the council conclusions will help us on that. Now, Agnieszka, what would be your final statement?
So I think that, of course, media literacy, critical thinking, they are just fundamental skills nowadays, but we do not have to forget about education as such and general knowledge. We need to have citizens that know science, a little bit about that. They know history, they know something about geopolitical relations between countries, about EU functioning and EU competencies, so that we do not have such a situation that on the day of referendum in Great Britain, when it was lost for the supporters of EU, suddenly search engines started to look for what is the EU question. It shows that societies quite often, they are not educated. If so many people can believe in all these fake cures now, that drinking a lot of water can help you flush out the virus, we can see that perhaps also we should start from the basics and really to invest more in general knowledge, whereas media literacy and thinking critically is, I would say, a step further. But of course, both are critically important, and I do hope that one day we have a society that will be media literate and that will have a lot of knowledge. Although right now I might be a bit less optimistic, because I would also think that certain governments, autocratic and populistic, they do not actually care for having well-educated and critically thinking societies, but that's a different question.
That is a difficult question also. Indeed, I want to thank you all. My conclusion is that a lot of work and a lot of knowledge and wisdom is there already. We need to work together more. And media literacy is somehow all about the citizen and the tools we can give the citizens and their ability to use those tools, and more than anything else, in a way, their willingness, their mindset to want to know what's trustworthy and want to see what they share and learn and talk about. It is that is true. That how can we improve this willingness? I think that is a very interesting key question. With this, as the time has been spent, I want to thank very much all of you panelists and for your time. And I think you have been a very interesting panel, and I'm very, very proud that you participated in the session with me. And I wish you all a very nice continuation of your work and happy summer days. Thank you.